Hello and welcome to the Studio Meala Podcast. Joining me today is Sinead or Reagan. Sinead, hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me.
You're very welcome. Now, if you've been following the work of Studio Meala even casually, then the chances are high that you've seen some of Sinead's work. She has worked on The Frog, the Murder by Numbers intro, The Bean, the incredible Living Tombstone music video for Sunburn, and much more. Sinead is an art director, background lead, and background key artist at Studio Meala. Was that all correct?
Yeah, it sounds pretty good. Probably missed a couple things, but it's fine.
Now, first of all, can you tell us what each of those roles actually are?
Yes. But I am an art director at Studio Meala, mainly for some IP that we have going on, mainly for Animal Airport. That's an IP that we're working on right now. We made a trailer for it for Cartoon Forum last year, and currently I'm a background lead and background key artist on a series, on the series that we're working on right now, and that hasn't been formally announced just yet, but I'm sure you'll hear about it very, very soon. Hopefully, anyway.
You mentioned Animal Airport. I'm very keen to talk about that. And folks listening, if you haven't seen the Animal Airport trailer, go look that up right now. It is a thing of beauty. Now, where did Animal Airport come from?
Animal Airport was a project that Stephen Reagan actually approached me to work on before I even started working at the studio. It's an IP that he's been developing for a while, and he needed character designs, he needed a character lineup. So that's what I did for him before I even started working in the studio. I did a rough character lineup, and for a long time that was it. Eventually I started working for the studio, and we wanted to make a trailer for some IP for Cartoon Forum because we really want to make the show. We really want to get funding. So yeah, we put together the trailer. That was last year. We had a really small team. I think there was maybe 10, maybe like 5 or 6 people worked on the trailer. It was really fun to have like a little tiny team and to be calling all the shots just within our studio. And I would love to be able to do that more and not that it's a bad thing to work for clients, but it is so nice to just be able to fully approve things in studio, and everything just seemed to work so smoothly that way.
I would not have thought that was such a small team.
I'm fairly sure it was a very small team because the storyboards was mostly myself and Sean, and then we had Matt and Dara on animation, Olga on comp, and I was doing the designs and the backgrounds. And I hope I'm not forgetting anyone there, but I think that was
there's 100 people listening to this right now and they're furious.
I think that was it now.
It was because the power had gone to your head at the time. You just couldn't see the little people anymore.
Yeah.
And you say you want more of that power in future?
Yes. This is what we want. But yeah, it's a lovely project.
It is. I'm really hoping Animal Airport goes forward. A background lead. What goes on there?
A lot of organisation, a lot of planning, a lot of spreadsheets and templates and that sort of nonsense. Layering.
So is that different to a layout artist?
Yeah, like I think different studios do different things different ways because most of our teams are very small, so we tend to kind of stack up a little bit on responsibility sometimes.
It seems when people talk about animation in the past, the roles seemed very straightforward in terms of like someone does the backgrounds, and that's as simple as it is, and then someone does the animation, and then those are just dropped on top of one another. And now, you know, you've hear these other titles like a background key artist, and like even the title of art director itself seems to have come out of character design. Is that right?
See, it also depends on the project, because I've been on projects where an art director hasn't touched character design at all, and all the character design approvals go through the director, and it really depends on the project. So sometimes it can be confusing when you see job titles, because I previously worked in Boulder, and my job title was assistant character designer and cleanup artist. And oftentimes when you say cleanup artist, people normally think, well, that's when you clean up the animation, the frame by frame animation. This was I was drawing up character rigs for Toon Boom, so it was like a different kind of cleanup. But it often does get confusing when different jobs are called different things in different pipelines. But for our project anyway, our background team is quite small, so that's why I'm doing lead as well as keys. Key artists, it's usually just designing a location. So there might be, 4 locations in an episode. You'll do maybe 1 or 2 keys per location, and then the rest of the backgrounds are based off of those keys.
So is it similar to like a style guide for locations? Is it?
Yeah, it's similar. It's probably kind of tighter than that, because when you're working on keys, usually you're basing it off of concept, because everything kind of comes one after the other in that way. So it's more of getting the line work, getting the colors. Then for the rest of the backgrounds, you can take elements and reuse them for the rest of the backgrounds. You can know what color everything is supposed to be, and it just kind of helps inform the rest of the episode.
And what are some of the influences that you take into your work?
Can you hear all those crows? Okay, there's quite a lot of crows outside. I don't think there's really anything I can do about that.
Not to worry.
This is the time of the evening where about 200 crows fly across the sky. Oh God. And then they land on the roofs, and then they go from the roofs to the trees.
If they don't go away, then I will simply title this episode Crows.
Oh, they won't go away. They won't. Yeah, what was that? Remind me quickly of this.
What are some of the influences that you're taking into your work?
I'm probably going to say, because lately this has been a huge inspiration to me, but Steven Universe. Probably one of my favorite animated shows. But anime comes in really big as well. Kyoto Animation. There's stuff like K-On!, Tamako Market, cutesy stuff. I like cute stuff. I like slice of life. I like round, squishy, cute shapes. I don't really care what the story's about.
As long as there's no triangles and squares and stuff.
It's art. Yeah, it's completely artificial. Just
you like when everything is sort of a marshmallow? Would that be fair to say?
That is fair.
I mean, Steven Universe definitely looks himself like you could squish him like a marshmallow.
Yeah, I also really like Sanrio characters, Rilakuma, and all those little mascot characters, Pisuke and Usagi.
You look absolutely delighted just thinking about them. So yeah, I believe this is a true love, a true appreciation.
Snoopy is the new one that I'm getting into.
Tell me, what is your dream project? Limitless budget, limitless resources.
When you say like limitless budget, I feel like I just want to hire a lot of people and pay them like 5 times what they're already getting paid, and we can take a really long time doing it, and it can just be so leisurely and enjoyable, and no one has to rush doing anything. It can just be like oh wow, draw some cute characters and they can just be doing whatever. Who cares? We're getting paid so much money for this.
So at the end of all this is just an incomprehensible 10-hour epic about soft animals.
Yeah.
Where there's no story. It's just some moving images. And everyone's like, how on earth did this end up costing $100 billion?
Is this where our taxes are going? I think Animal Airport definitely would be a project that I would enjoy. It's definitely kind of in my wheelhouse of cute animal characters. But I mean, to be honest, like any project where I could have the creative freedom to create the characters that I want to make, and you know, I'm not a director, I'm not a writer, but I would love to just be involved in just one of those shows that's like, I don't know, like Adventure Time, like one of those very iconic start of a generation shows. just because
So it feels like you want to be a part of creating characters that connect with people.
Yeah, definitely relatable characters that stick with people.
But like, what is that little bit of magic that tips certain characters into icons that have some sort of resonance with oftentimes millions of people? Like New Horizons sold over 40 million copies.
It's insane.
The thought of 40 million people knowing those characters, what is it about those characters, as simple as they are, that somehow tips over into wildly popular fandom? Like,
it's probably also a bit of a blessing and a curse on one end, but it just in my head, it is just the kind of, that's the dream, making a really cool thing that everyone loves, but also probably like a lot of people hate as well, and that's the horrible part of it.
Like, certainly with Steven Universe, it must be very strange to have a fan base so intense, and also knowing there's people who are just so angry, just
for no particular reason as well. Just
even fans who are also so angry. That's when you really know you've made it. Not only do you have lovers and haters, but you have lovers who hate you. That's
it's rough when you see it. It's rough. You see it on Twitter quite a lot. I think I would work on any show, as long as, well, obviously maybe not any show, but if the production crew is good, if the work is good, then like, who cares if you're just remaking the Rugrats or some random thing, like, but all these shows are probably good in their own right, and they're for kids a lot of the time. I'm sure all these shows are great to work on, and there's some shows that really, even like big shows that everyone loves, super popular shows, you know, maybe the production's just really horrible, or maybe you get this tiny show that barely anyone watched and the crew have an amazing time on it.
I do think it is a wonderful thing that conversations about how the employees who make the things that we consume, that happens at all. Who on earth was talking about the working conditions of the people making Transformers in 1980, whatever? You know, it just, people weren't talking about that kind of thing.
No.
Where would they talk about it, and why would anyone even think about it? But it's just, you know, the fact that these conversations are happening are definitely going to be pushing us slowly but surely into better conditions. You would
absolutely. People need to talk to each other about what's going on, about how they're being treated, about that there's such a taboo about talking about, say, how much money you're making or all that stuff. But I think if people just talk to each other about it, it's really the only thing we can do right now. But it'll improve the work situation for everyone else if, you know, you and your studio are respecting people and are paying people fairly. Then, you know, other studios are going to see that. Workers are going to start asking, well, why aren't you doing that?
Book. House, book. House, book. house.
What do you think is key for having a healthy work-life balance?
I think I've been pretty good about this lately, keeping my work hours strictly to work hours, 9 to 5 only. And I think working from home for a lot of people has been strange because all of a sudden maybe their desk is in their bedroom. When they stop working, they're sleeping in the same room that they work in, or they're like hanging out in the same room that they work in. I'm pretty lucky now that I have a separate office and that I can just close the door and I don't have to look at it. And if you can separate it as much as you can, that's probably the best way to do it. I think the only times that I really have worked overtime or overworked myself was expectations from myself, feeling like, oh, well, I haven't done a good enough job on this, I'm going to do a few extra hours. And I think you just kind of have to say, like, it's grand, it's fine. just submit it. It's probably going to be fine.
How do you find that point with work when you know it's done? Because, of course, you could keep adjusting anything forever, but every artistic endeavor everyone's ever done, there had to be a point where you step away or die in the middle of it. So how do you decide when, okay, it's done?
Well, for backgrounds, I feel like that's pretty easy because, I don't know, when you colour it all, then it's done. I don't know. But there is the kind of thing of like, oh, well, maybe I'll add some cars there in the background. Then you have to draw some cars. So you're filling things out for no reason, and it's on screen for a second. That happened to me with the Murder by Numbers intro, and the opening shot. You're panning up on the city, and you're panning up from a cliff. So the cliff ended up kind of covering this car park that I drew with like a load of cars in like this really odd perspective, these tiny, tiny cars. And I drew these like tiny benches and this little like rubbish bin full of rubbish and all this other tiny stuff. I don't know. I guess that's why art books are nice and why scene production art is nice, because you get to be like, oh, wow, yeah, I didn't really get to focus on that because like there was a big character in the way, or there was all this other stuff in the way. But you after working on like a project for a while, you kind of get to know like, oh, okay, well, it might not look finished now, but it will look finished when the character is in there and everything is comped together. Because there's been so many backgrounds that I've looked at and I think, oh, I don't like that, I don't like how that turned out, and I have a look at it after it's all been comped together and I'm like, oh wow, that looks great. Everything, it makes sense now, everything's put together. It doesn't look weird and empty because it was empty, there was no character in it. That's the thing about backgrounds.
I guess there is a temptation to make each background look like such a beautifully finished piece that
its own little mini painting or something. But once you get into the flow of production, that kind of stops a bit. And for stuff like character design is probably something where you always feel like, well, I could probably do another pose here, or I could probably add another expression there. But again, with production, it's all very like time limited, and often a very small studio, we have very limited amounts of time.
I suppose that question varies greatly when I'm talking about personal or professional work, because the answer to professional work is always going to be when you run out of time.
Yeah.
So it's either never or when the clock strikes.
The only personal deadlines that have worked for me, I guess this doesn't count as a personal deadline, but comic conventions. That's always been a great kind of deadline or event that has really spurred me on to make prints. And the big deadline is like, well, I have to order the prints on this date to get them in time for the convention. So you just work really hard until then.
I am really looking forward to when we get to attend one of those again.
Yeah, because there was, right before the big bad happened, I was preparing for Dublin Comic Con. I think it was supposed to be maybe the weekend after lockdown happened. and I had ordered all this stuff, and I was making zines, which I had never done before. I've just been left with all this. I have stacks of prints. I was making like clay pins. I never finished those.
I saw that Meala zine that you did only recently, and it's beautiful. It's amazing. I really hope those get out to people in the end.
Yeah, I was particularly excited about the Meala zine, and I really had a lot of big plans at the time for doing more issues, because the plan was that we had a certain amount of money set aside to, you know, pay each artist who did a piece, and if we could sell those, it would kind of fund itself, and we could just keep making them that way. But it's kind of hard to sell something like that online. But I do. The box of zines is behind me, the big box of zines, and I just wasn't set up to post everything out. You know, it would have been a whole other undertaking to sell them online. With
It'll be a great welcome back to the world thing.
Yeah, it will be. I still can't really imagine. I can't really imagine one happening or going to one right now. If we could
go door to door.
Yeah.
And just say, do you want this?
A zine?
Costs this much.
Just pretend it's for Trogra or something.
Yeah. You end up with this one small village in Offaly where everyone loves Studio Meala.
Yeah.
And
do a sponsored run.
No one else outside that knows. It's like, no, someone came around and sold us all this merch.
Sold us all this stuff. We love it. We're obsessed with it. If only.
I'm looking forward to Dublin Comic Con being a thing again, so that you and Sean can get a table and I can show up at about 10 a.m. and sit down and be there all day uninvited.
Just hiding behind our print display, just relaxing, just like, well, I've done what I came here to do and I'm going to sit here now.
Yeah, sticking my feet up on the table on top of the prints and everything.
Knocking over the money box. Ooh.
What began your interest in animation?
I don't think I ever really thought of it as a career until maybe fifth year. And I think at the time I knew I wanted to do something in art because of you're kind of limited with the subjects that you pick. Like maybe something else that I wanted to do, oh, you need higher maths. And it's like, oh, okay. Or you need like all three sciences. And I'm like, oh, right, okay. Don't have those. But I had art. I was doing art, and I did this Saturday course in IADT during sixth year that just kind of went through the basics of how to animate stuff, and like I got like a couple projects done. Classic kind of bouncing ball, little walk,
you squash
cycle.
And stretch.
Yeah, we did this like bouncing head thing, and I ended up applying to both colleges at the time, IADT and BCFE, and I ended up going to Ballyfermot because it was just closer to where I lived. Really, that was the reason.
A beautiful endorsement there.
It was just closer.
BCFE, I know you're listening. Be sure to get that printed in the brochure. It might be closer to where you live.
It was just closer. And, my dad drove by there on the way to work, so that was a really good just scab a lift.
I'm seeing
well.
a little picture of you on the brochure with the thumbs up endorsement and the in quotes. It was on my dad's way to work.
Yeah, but before that, I just liked watching cartoons.
What were some faves?
Well, I think obviously I was older when Adventure Time came out, but I remember when Adventure Time came out and I was just kind of like, oh, this is the best thing ever. I think that was about the time when I was kind of starting to think about animation as a college thing that I could do. Then I suppose before that, like Avatar: The Last Airbender, Cardcaptors, Sailor Moon, Pokemon.
Looking at Pokemon and thinking, I want to animate like that.
But I never did I ever really think I want to animate like that. I think I was more focused on like the characters. Like I like drawing the characters. I found a lot of old sketchbooks. There was a lot of recess. Remember recess?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, for some reason, a lot of recess drawings. For some reason, I don't really know
Any
why.
crossovers? Was Brock meeting the recess kids?
No, there was Brock drawings though. A lot of like Final Fantasy X drawings. Fruits baskets, another one I drew a lot. The Lion King.
Stuff like Final Fantasy X, and a lot of those Final Fantasy designs were great for those early fan art things, because there was often so many little details that you could trick yourself into thinking you were really good by just copying all these teeny tiny details, and you step back and go, hey, pretty good.
I remember, like, I don't even remember what age I was. I could have been maybe 13 or 14 or something, and I drew Lulu, and it was like, I was so proud of this drawing, and it was like the coolest thing I'd ever drawn. There was so, like, all the details and all those belts under her dress or whatever was going on there. And I drew it all, and yeah, that exact thing. There were so many bits, and I was just like, wow, I'm amazing at drawing. Look at that.
And then you draw a cactuar, which is really easy, and it looks rubbish. It's like,
Yeah.
Clearly my skill set is in just like the highly detailed. It's like, I'm too good for something as silly as a cactuar.
Needs more belts.
What was the best mistake that you learned from on your way to greatness?
I think I've had a lot of low confidence when it comes to my art, especially like I suffered from that a lot in college. I still can't watch my final year film at all. And I think at the time I was kind of putting too much of my ownership on it. I was the director on the project, and it was, and anything that went wrong for whatever reason was somehow my fault. When it's not true. Like, I mean, everyone kind of had crap experiences on their film in college. Like, it's like one of your first group projects. But it also kind of taught me that I don't really want to be a director. I'll be an art director. I'll do that part. But I think being the head of a project, I don't think that's necessarily for me. But
you're taking too much on your shoulders, perhaps. Like,
something. But it was never external. It was all kind of internal. It was all just kind of coming from me and my perceived notions on what I should be doing or what I should be able to do. Because in the end, you're always going to be working in a team, and like, you can rely on the people in your team, and everyone has different strengths in that way. And even when I made my Mala Mini, that was just something I worked on by myself. I made that by myself. And it was just this really simple concept of a dog looking at some fruit. And that was it. And just kind of realizing, like, okay, well, like, I made something by myself and I adapted it to what I know I can do. I made the animation really simple, and I focused it on the color and the design, which I like doing, instead of trying to do all this complicated animation or trying to do a complicated story that I think I'm supposed to do. Like, in college, when you're making your final film and you're looking at all this reference and you're looking at all the other films and you're seeing all these art pieces that are beautifully written and deep, and they say something, and you have like mentors and teachers kind of saying the same thing, that they want your short to be about something. But I feel like I just could have done it in a completely different way. But now I know that I can make something in my own way, and it doesn't necessarily have to be what everyone else thinks a short should be, or I can work through my own capabilities and make something simple and love doing it.
So we say that over time, learn to play to your strengths better than perhaps strive for some kind of like big thing that's hitting every no, that's definitely a great thing to learn, because sometimes people will try to trick you into thinking otherwise, but there is nobody who is alone hitting every thing of like, oh, it's so incredibly beautifully animated, and the colors are just so amazing, and also the story was the most moving, incredible, and the music was like, everyone who appears to be one of those people who they've got people around them who are just also very good, and it's when you have a group of people playing to their strengths. So it's great that you've found your own, and now you know what to bring to future group projects.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a shame to see people feel bad about themselves because they're not achieving all these things.
Just like, oh God, this is all my fault that I'm not making good enough decisions and I can't do this. And it was all just like these weird expectations that I had on myself. But it's hard to let that go. Like, I still get that a lot as well. But
I think anyone who works on things themselves, no matter what the field, you're gonna look at what other people are doing, and you're going to see 100 people who do the same sort of things you do, and they're all doing it differently, and you love what everyone else is doing, and then you'll put it on yourself. It's like, oh, I wish I could do that. Oh, and I wish I could also do that. And I wish I could also do that. And it's about stepping back and going, now look, every one of these people might be great, but they also will be looking at each other and saying, oh, I wish I could do that. They're not all able to do all those things. So
exactly.
Give yourself a break, folks.
Exactly. Go easy on yourself. Just make something.
Be kind to yourself, as they say.
Be kind. Be nice.
Before we go, I shall draw one of Brian Eno and Peter Schmidt's oblique strategy cards.
This podcast is just an ad for oblique strategies at this point.
No, before anyone thinks that might be true, I would not recommend anyone buy them unless they have loads of money, because I was shocked by how much these cost.
Oh.
They are an absolute rip-off. It's a box of cards and it costs too much. Everyone listening to this podcast, do a whip round, buy one, and then just share that box. Okay, let's see. Think inside the work. Think outside the work. So, Sinead, when I say to you, think inside the work and think outside the work, what does that say to you?
Inside the work kind of feels like, well, that's behind the scenes. That's everyone working on it. It's the production crew. Outside the work, maybe that's the people who are watching it.
No,
you have to think about both of those things when you're making something.
Do you have moments when you're working on something where you'll be so into the getting it done, you're thinking about it production wise, and then suddenly there's a realization of, oh yeah, like what this is ultimately for, people are going to watch it outside, and I think it's quite hard to think of those two things at the same time. I think you'll generally either be one or the other.
It kind of usually just hits you in the face, it's released and people are commenting on it, or people are retweeting it or something like that, and you're like, oh wow, people are seeing it and they're saying things, and on one hand you get like the little kind of dopamine rush of like, oh, they like it, they really like it, and then on the other hand you'd see like some weird comments or people saying, like kind of comparing it to other stuff, and you're kind of like, oh I didn't mean to make it look like that, or I didn't want it to look like this. But
the only comments that make me want to engage, I mean, obviously never engage, just
no, absolutely not.
That would never happen anyway, but the only ones where there's a temptation is not when people are really nice, and it's also not when people are really mean, but it's when someone says something that you just want to clarify something. They've said something and you're like, oh no, if they could even be being nice about it, but they just say something that makes you want to go, no, actually, if I could just make something clear here. And those are the only ones that personally I feel that, oh, no, I'm,
There's definitely, yeah. So sometimes when you read something, you're like, well, what did you mean by that? Because
Yeah.
there's no tone to comments. It's just text. You can read that in whatever way that you, whatever tone your brain assigns to that piece of text. That's what that is, and you can decide to be offended by it, or you can just be neutral and move on. But sometimes it's like, what did you mean?
If people did reply to their comments more, the most common sentence would be, what do you mean? Not thank you or go screw. It would be, what do you mean? So
Please
many comments
explain.
are incomprehensible.
Yeah, completely. And I don't really know who these people are, especially on YouTube. Good God. Sometimes you're reading comments and it's like, excuse me?
Well, to anyone listening to this podcast on YouTube, please leave us an incomprehensible comment.
Please, it's all we want.
and
And we won't reply.
And we will not get back to you.
No, absolutely not.
Sinead, thank you very much for joining me on the podcast.
Oh, thank you.
I really hope that we're going to see more of Animal Airport.
Yeah, I really hope so too.
And again, everyone
Keep an eye
listening,
out.
go check it out and tell the world that you want to see these animals in this airport.
These adorable, adorable animals. Please, please let me make this. It's my only chance.
Good night, everybody.